This video contains swearing, adult themes, and crude humor. Viewer discretion is advised. The Giddy Death of the Gays and the Strange Demise of Straights is... well, for one, that title is one hell of a mouthful. Unlike my ex... Giddy Death and Strange Demise is a novel written by Redfern John Barrett, who succinctly described the book in an interview with Insane Owl as polyamory propaganda, which is... well, I mean, it's accurate, but that's only the beginning of it. The core relationship of the text, to everyone's surprise, is a platonic romance between two heterosexual men, Richard and... Dom. Richard and Dom are friends and roommates whose relationship blossoms into something more emotionally intimate than a friendship, but not at all sexually intimate because they both happen to be straight, at least in terms of sexual attraction. Dom's girlfriend, Carolyn, doesn't take the news well, as you might imagine. However, after taking some time to let the initial fallout shake off and think about what she's willing to accept in a relationship, Carolyn decides to give this whole polyamory thing a shot with Richard and Dom, and that's more or less what the main story is about. The narrative also weaves through their network of friends, primarily through the perspective of an eccentric NB named Rooty, expanding the scope of the story to be about an LGBT community quietly surviving in the largely conservative city of Swansea, Wales. The story kicks off with a downtown nightclub set ablaze, causing a surge of anti-LGBT violence to follow in the city over the subsequent weeks. Following the story of our main characters and their network of friends gives the readers a panoramic display of underground gay life against the backdrop of this decaying metropolis. The polyphonic narrator displays themselves early on when the evening of the nightclub burning is told 4 times from 4 different perspectives. The voice of the narrator alternates between Carolyn, Richard, Dom, and Rooty, with key scenes often told from multiple perspectives one after the other, with a 5th unnamed narrator being used exclusively for flash forwards into a speculative future. I personally think that a polyphonic narrator is the only appropriate way to showcase a story that's mostly interested in polyamory. In addition to the advantages that a polyphonic narrator typically brings to the table by itself, it's also a tacit way of showing the reader that all perspectives within the arrangement are equally valuable. It's not just about one person two-timing or a couple bringing in a unicorn to shake things up. It's a mutual, committed relationship between all participants, and the novel shows this by having each person give their perspective to the reader in their own voice. As you may have already picked up, this book is also interested in the separation of romantic love and sexual lust. Very briefly, this is the idea that the range of people that you're capable of falling romantically in love with is different from the range of people that you're capable of being sexually attracted to. For Giddy Death and Strange Demise, the exploration of this theme isn't woven into the form of the text in the same way that the polyamory theme is. However, something that I, shall we say, appreciated a lot was that the novel was absolutely shameless in how bluntly and concisely it chose to explain the dynamic between Richard and Dom.
My cock likes girls, Richard, but I love you.
I know how you feel. My cock doesn't like you either, but I love you too.
I love you, Richard.
I love you, Dom.
Oh my god. That is the worst thing I've ever read. But I fucking love it. I am fucking marveling at the sheer, unabashed fucking balls you have to possess to write something this blunt. Oh my god, it's amazing. I'm bowing down in fucking respect for this man. Oh, I love it. Oh. Okay, in terms of ideas... I can't do it. Okay, so far, in terms of ideas, we've got separating romantic and sexual attraction and polyamory as two of the main topics of interest juggled by this novel. But there's still one more big thing to talk about. This book also features themes to do with gender and expression, which are mainly conveyed through the character of Ruti, the eccentric NB. Now, if I had to give a genuine criticism against this novel for something, I'd say that I think it maybe should have expanded the gender themes to a larger portion of the cast. As it stands, it seems as though exploring gender is only relevant to Ruti because they happen to be non-binary. I think it would have improved the novel's thematic interests for the explorations of gender to also be relevant to the cisgendered characters. Their involvement with those themes doesn't really expand much beyond learning to accept Ruti for who they are over the course of the novel, which is fine, but it could be way better. Okay, so Ruti is one of the narrators, and whenever they're speaking to the reader, they use invented pronouns to refer to all characters in the story, regardless of gender. Here's a very brief example of what that reads like.
The one currently before me was younger than most, and despite her crisp appearance, was vaguely attractive. She stared at me with dark, strangely serious eyes. Z had a strong jawline and looked somehow familiar. I wanted to talk to her.
Okay, I know this is going to be a huge barrier to a lot of readers, so I'll say right now, if you just don't like the idea of invented pronouns, feel free to skip this novel. It's not for you. That's absolutely fine. However, and this is the reason why I find this novel so fascinating, invented pronouns actually do have an enormous advantage when applied in literary form, as opposed to other contexts. You see, audiovisual media like film, television, video games, theatre, and so on, or even stories told only in audio form like radio plays and audiobooks, are all distinct forms of art. However, literature is consumed fundamentally differently to all of them. Crucially for this novel, the act of reading text is fundamentally a different mode of consumption than listening to speech. So when you read the invented pronouns on the page, you have to internalize that use of pronouns and reproduce it as a voice in your own mind in order to consume the story. Your mind's voice has to incorporate invented pronouns into its lexicon in order for the story to be passed. If you're determined to read this book to its conclusion, this is probably a very effective way to acclimate your mind to seeing and hearing invented pronouns. Hypothetically, if Giddy Death and Strange Demise were instead a movie or a TV show, you would hear Ruti using Z and here, and the show would continue unabated regardless of whether you acclimated or not. You could watch the entire show completely rejecting the use of invented pronouns from start to finish, and you'd still be able to watch the show. However, because this is literature and the story only exists decoded from words in your mind, you cannot read Ruti's chapters unless you absorb and mentally reproduce the invented pronouns. It's a way for art to attempt to bypass filters of taste and assist the reader in acclimating to a use of language that they might normally reject. Call me a dork, but I think that's pretty cool. This is also why I'm not actually using the invented pronouns as I'm speaking in this video. I mean, on the one hand, yes, it is also because I'm an enormous coward. If you're concerned that I'm misgendering Ruti by not using their preferred pronouns, I actually talked to the author, Redfern John Barrett, who explained Ruti's pronouns like this.
Well, Ruti actually, I think, has a similar relationship with pronouns that I do myself. You know, that was something that I was representing, and it's something that I've thought about more and more as time has gone on. You know, I personally use both they and he, but for me, it's more of an ideological position. I would like to see a society in which we move away from gendered pronouns.
You can see the ideological approach to pronouns alive in Ruti's narration. They will frequently introduce the reader to incidental characters in a way that deliberately obscures that character's gender, and it's notable that while reading, I found myself almost chomping at the bit for signifiers that would clue me as to whether that passing stranger was a man or a woman. Well, it's quite interesting noticing that as the character whose gender is obscured does and says certain things that almost I'm trying to pick up on whether this character is a man or a woman. And I noticed myself doing that, and it kind of reading other people's gender is like such an automatic process that I actually notice when I can't do it. I've chosen to use singular they when referring to Ruti in this video because they describe themselves as being neither a man nor a woman, and it's also never stated that sie and hier are the pronouns that Ruti prefers for themselves. They just refer to everyone using invented pronouns as an ideological exercise. Singular they has also just become flatly more popular than invented pronouns recently for perhaps understandable reasons, but I still think that the use of invented pronouns in Giddy Death and Strange Demise is still interesting from a theoretical literary perspective regardless. Just to clarify, I wouldn't be recommending this novel only for using invented pronouns in this way. The story this use of language is attached to is also deeply engaging. Ruti's story is of a tired and cynical person who feels like the world is wrong and they don't have a place in it, slowly connecting with more people and finding a place and a direction. It's also done in parallel to the polyamory story and the rising anti-LGBT violence in the city. It's perhaps not the most sophisticated plot simply taken beat by beat, but it's good enough of a tale and Ruti is good enough of a character that I, as a reader, didn't feel like I was being asked to acclimate to an unusual writing choice just for its own sake. If you're interested in how literary form can be used to bolster LGBT themes, I highly recommend this novel. If you're interested in reading something experimental, I highly recommend this novel. If you want a high-quality polyamorous romance story, then, well, there are a few glaring typos here and there, but I still highly recommend this novel. The only thing I should warn you about is that the book could be an acquired taste for some. I actually didn't make it all the way through on my first reading, but after giving it some time, reflecting on it, and making a second attempt with a fresh mindset, I was able to enjoy it a lot. If you're able to find a copy in a library or a bookstore that's local to you, I highly recommend you support them by borrowing or purchasing your copy there. If you can't find this book in a library or in local stores, you can purchase this novel from the publisher's website, lethpressbooks.com, Alabreese Blackwell's, and Better World Books, and some other outlets that I've linked in the description. This is one of the books that I actually ordered online because I strangely couldn't find any copies in Melbourne bookstores. I hope you enjoyed this video. There might be a longer break between this review and the next one, but I'm also looking to expand the scope of this channel to other types of video content. Don't worry, I'm not going to post another clickbait video. I'm well aware that I can only get away with that once. But feel free to let me know the types of things that you want to see from me. I would also appreciate it a lot if you liked, commented, subscribed, and shared the video. Thank you very much for watching.